Hi, this is John. So it's the 25th of October 2023 and a good friend has lent me this tractor and strip tiller that we're going to go into this field now and start making lines for our field, our plantings this coming summer. So he's just setting up the tractor and he's about to go into the field. Okay, so now he's going to go in for his first cut. He's just measured up the first row on his GPS system. So now they're just setting the machine and we'll get into the field for the first pass with the strip tiller. It's a very clever little machine this guy, his friend, has made. It's got at the back, you can see these row markers, these things here, which will make the holes for the maize seed and the other crop seeds that we're going to plant. So it's a very clever little implement. On the front it's got this coulter for cutting, followed by a ripper, two ripper, and the rippers have got this this blade at the bottom, so that'll go down, I don't know, 20-30 centimeters depending, and then at the back you've got this crumbler roller with these station markers. Yeah, so he's about to get started and go into the field. I'm really thankful for my friend for doing this. So here he gets going. First pass, and now he's going into the second pass. It's got a GPS system, so it should be very accurate in terms of the spacing. So I'm really happy about this. This is fantastic. We had sun hemp and some lab. You can still see the sun hemp stems here. So it's quite a rough scenario, but this is what I want. I want to maintain as much residue on this field as I can. We'll come in and plant in here and band apply herbicide over the rows, and hopefully that'll work out fine. If you remember last year we dissed this field. I had to, in the way I was late, I had to rush and do things. Didn't want to do it, but anyway, this year this is what I really want to do, is a strip tillage, minimal soil disturbance, maintenance of residue, and you can see some of it is green, so there's green and living roots in the soil now, which is great. So I think it'll all work out alright. It's going to be a challenge along the way as we deal with different issues, but we know we can make the best of it. We are here at the farm on the 10th of November 2023, and 2 days ago we had some really good rain on the farm, and so it's nice and wet, so we want to get started planting of our crops. And you can see behind me the field that we're going to be planting, and let me explain this in a little bit more detail. This is the top end of our field. It goes down to the end there, and along this strip we've got these trees that we planted last summer, and they are starting to grow nicely with the rain that we've had. We've had 2 good showers of rain about 2 weeks apart, so it's nice and wet here. And so this was the field, the first 1 hectare block, and we had this ripped by a ripper, and it was a field where we grew sun hemp and lab last year as a kind of a green manure cover crop. We didn't do anything to the field except rip. Now we've got one row here where we are planting lucina trees. Here's a little lucina tree, acacia and moringa down this strip here. Then we've got 1.45 meters adjacent to that, 13 rows of ripped and hold out lines, and in the center of this is row number 7, we are planting bracharia grass. Okay, so we've got 6 rows on either side of the bracharia grass, and then we come across here 6 rows, and we'll have another line here where you can see this peg with 1.5 meter gap on either side, where we'll be planting those 3 legume trees. In between the legume trees we're going to plant pigeon pea as well. So the legume trees are about 3 meters apart, and the pigeon peas will go in between those 3 meter stations. Now the layout of these 6 rows between the legume trees and the bracharia grass is going to be like this. We're going to have 2 rows of maize, and you can see we've put into the holes manure. There's a handful of manure, and we're also going to put a handful of Johnson Sioux compost. Then we're going to have 2 rows here. You can see the one row here, and adjacent to it another row of groundnuts or cowpeas, and then 2 rows of maize. So that's the pattern. So we cross over the tree line here, and there'll be 2 rows of maize, 2 rows of groundnuts or cowpeas, and 2 rows of maize, and so on through the field. So you can see the bracharia grass has been planted here again in this row, and we continue with the pattern through this field. Here we have Simba planting the bracharia grass. It's nice and wet, so it's going to take off very nicely. You see each bracharia has got some roots at the bottom of it. So these are just grown from last year's cuttings, and we split them up and plant them, each little slip with a root. And here we have one of our workers who's applying the manure, just a handful into each hole. So you can see there's quite a lot of weed growth in here. This is the grass weed from last year, and there is here and there a bit of broadleaf, but I'm pretty happy with this. We have got this living root in the soil, which has been there pretty much through the whole winter. Okay, it dried off a bit in the winter, but it's coming away nicely. There's 1 or 2 places, very very small, few number like this, where the sun hemp from last year has taken off again, and here is some lab from last season. So I'm happy about that we've got this green root in here. Now you might say, okay, what am I going to do with this weed? Well, I'm going to put Roundup on. Yeah, we can argue about that, but I just want to make sure we get this going and started properly. So we're going to round up in between the maize rows and not apply any Roundup onto the actual maize rows itself. So we just want to kill the green weeds or green plants in between the maize rows. And then over the maize row, I'm going to put metallic claw. So the Metallochlor will just keep the emerging maize clean of weeds for a couple of weeks, which I think is important. And then we'll just monitor how the crop is as we go on. I know in this regen we would like to move away from herbicides, but I just want to take this step at a time and see how we progress. When we think about what we're doing here as well, you'll see that we're trying to create a very diverse, biodiverse field with the trees, the legume trees in strips or in rows every every about 8 meters, I think it is, 9 or 8 meters. And in between those tree rows, we will have a mixture of maize and legume crops, plus grass. So I'm just trying to create a biodiverse field, and also to have a dynamic field where there's different types of plants that have different growth habits. So like the perennials and the annuals. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, this is all a bit of an experiment here. I know other people have done similar things, so that's where I've copied a lot of this approach from, as I've talked and looked at other people's activities. So we'll see how it goes. We'll start planting just now. We've got 5 of these hectares to plant. Each hectare is going to be slightly different in the way it's configured and the way it's what kind of plants are going to be in there. So I want to just try a number of different options. So there'll be, for example, maize and groundnuts, maize and maize and cowpea, maize and velvet bean. And then down towards the end there, I'm going to have forage sorghum and lab and velvet bean as a forage source and as a kind of a cover crop. So every year the intention is that there'll be 4 blocks, maybe 3 or 4 blocks of maize and legumes and 1 block of cover crops, and we'll rotate it like that. So that's what we have here. I'll show you in a minute when we get to the planting, what that'll look like. In addition to the manure that we're putting in the holes for the maize, we're also putting some fertilizer. This is the standard compound D, which has 7N, 14P2O5 and 7K2O. So that will help the maize. We are also going to get some organic D from a fertilizer company from South Africa that produces a mixture of chicken manure and fertilizer, and we're going to put that in some of the holes as well, just to compare that. So there we are, about ready to start planting. Here we are planting the maize seed. We're putting 3 seeds into each hole, and we'll likely thin to 2 just to see how the stand emerges. Make sure we get 100% stand. So there we have the seed in the hole. 3 seeds just thrown in. A little bit of contact with the fertilizer, I'm not worried about. It's a very low rate of fertilizer. So yeah, it has a salt index, that's for sure, but not a very high salt index because it's fairly low analysis fertilizer of 7.14.7. So I'm not too worried about that. Then we'll cover this with a budger. You can see the soil is wet, nice and wet, yeah. So I expect that we'll get good germination here when we cover with this nice wet soil. So that's what it'll look like when we cover. Okay, I'm not going to cover with hand, we'll cover with budgers. And yeah. So the spacing between the gombas is about 50 centimeters, plus or minus a bit. And so we should end up with this kind of population of around 40,000, I hope 44,000, which I think will be ideal. Now the other thing I'm doing, which is maybe a little bit unconventional, so we've got 2 rows of maize, 2 rows of groundnuts or cowpeas, 2 rows of maize, and so on. So each 2 row of maize is going to be a different variety of maize. So we've got late maturing, we've got actually four varieties of maize. A late maturing hybrid called Mukwa, then a medium maturing called Maka, an early maturing called Mutsa, and a very early maturing called Manjanja. So we'll have a range of maturities in this field, 2 rows of each, and this is to give a little bit of variability. There is an El Nino this year, they say there could be a drought, so with some variability in flowering will help to mitigate sort of rainfall patterns that might be a bit tricky. So that's the field in process of being planted. We should finish at least 1, maybe 2 hectares today, and we'll pursue tomorrow, continue tomorrow, provided there's enough moisture, it doesn't dry out too much. And if it is drying out on the surface, we'll start planting and wait for the next rains. So there we have it. It's nice and early compared to last year. Remember last year we planted at the end of December, this year middle of November, so I'm happy about that. So thanks for watching, and I'll keep you posted on how this field and crop develops. Cheers.